Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast brings you stories and wisdom about life in law enforcement, giving support and encouragement to those who wear the badge. Today, you're going to hear an interview with Major Dewey Bond. Dewey is a friend of mine, and he's got a great sense of humor and a huge heart. He's retired from the Wyandotte County, Kansas Sheriff's Department, and he's going to share about how he got started in law enforcement, how he advanced up to warden in the county jail and to the rank of major. Listen to how he dealt with conflict and especially how he managed stress while working in detention. Finally, you don't want to miss one of the strangest jail lockdown stories you've ever heard. Here's Dewey Bond. How you doing, Dewey?
I'm doing great, Jared. Thank you.
I'm glad we were able to work this out. Been excited to get a chance to talk to you. I know you've got a lot of experience and a lot of history working in law enforcement. I was wondering if you could tell me how you got started, because you didn't come right out of high school and get right into law enforcement, right?
No, I sure didn't, Jared. As a matter of fact, my first career choice wasn't law enforcement at all. I was 18 years old, fresh out of school, and I went to work for Rock Island Railroad.
Oh,
I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed it, railroading very much. And I started out as a laborer, and then I took a 2-year apprenticeship, and I became a journeyman machinist.
really?
Yeah, working on those big old freight trains.
Right. But you didn't end up doing that long term. I mean, you did it for some years, right?
Yes, I was with Rock Island for almost 15 years.
Oh, okay. That's actually longer than I thought. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, the problem is the railroad closed down. They were bought out by another railroad.
Right.
And instead of keeping it going, they dissolved it and kept the track and put us on the street.
So you were already in your mid-30s, or early 30s anyway, right?
Yes.
And you had a family? You were married at this point?
Yes, I was. And it was really difficult for me, Jared, because, like I said, I was fresh out of school when I got into railroading. That's what I had planned to do until I retired. And I didn't know anything else but railroading.
Right.
So
how in the world do you get laid off from the railroad and you don't know what to do? How did you end up going into law enforcement?
Well, I was trying to do odds and end jobs. Wasn't very good at any of them, really, but they were bringing in a little bit of money. But a friend of mine who was working at the Sheriff's Department at the time got me sworn in as a reserve officer. And I was able to work security jobs when I wasn't performing volunteer work. A position opened in the jail, and my service as a reserve was such that I was highly recommended for the job, and after passing both written tests and an oral interview, I was hired. Okay.
You got out of the railroad business in 1980, and at that point, you weren't doing like an academy or anything at that point. That you got hired out of working as a reserve officer or reserve deputy or whatever the terminology was, and then you got hired in to work in the jail. Right?
Yes, I did, Jared.
Okay. And they did training like on the job and that kind of thing, I presume.
At that time, in that old jail, the training was you shadowed an officer for a few days, then they hand you a set of keys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it was hit or miss and learn by your mistakes.
Sure. So they have all kinds of different responsibilities, but you got hired into the jail, and you spent most of your career with the department working in detention, or did you do some other jobs also?
Here's where it gets real interesting. I spent a little over 2 years as a detention officer.
Okay.
And I advanced to an officer in charge, which was an assistant to the sergeant.
Okay.
And taking over as sergeant when he was not on duty for some reason.
Right.
Now, an opening in the front office for a reserve commander became available, and I applied for it. And I remember one of the things the sheriff brought up during my interview with him, he stated, I understand you supported my opponent at my election, and was there any reason for that? Well, I figured I'd lost the opportunity right there. I said, yes, sir, and I don't apologize for that. Your opponent gave me a job when I was out of work and I was raising a family, and I felt the least I could do was to help him out in the election.
Yeah, okay.
Well, at that point, the sheriff got silent, and, man, I'm feeling him staring at me. And then he said, I wouldn't have respected you if you'd had done any different. And I ended up getting the job over two deputies that actually had more qualifications than I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, from there, I was a reserve commander, of course. Then they needed a crime prevention officer, and I took on those duties. And later I became training director and instructor, and then range master.
Okay. Did you think that it helped that you were a little bit older than like the other deputies who maybe had the same number of years in the department that you had, but you were probably 10 or 15 years older than some of them? And so do you think that helped as far as being given responsibilities and that kind of thing?
Actually, what helped giving me the responsibilities is that I didn't put a time limit on my work, and I was determined to get the job done, and if I could improve it, improve it.
Okay. Okay.
Several of the other officers that tried for this position were the same age or maybe a little older than I was at the time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But the sheriff, he saw things in me that I didn't see myself, and that's where it went.
Okay.
Now, later on, I ended up with one of the biggest responsibilities that I could have ever asked for. Sheriff wanted me to take over his jail, and that came with the rank of captain. And at the time he interviewed me for that, he explained to me that the previous warden ran the jail undisciplined, and he was very pleased with the improvements I had made with my previous positions, and he needed my leadership. And so with that, I accepted. Jared, at the time, the jail we had was an old linear-style jail, and it was built in 1929.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And besides that, it was overcrowded and understaffed and in the middle of being sued by the ACLU.
Right.
So I really walked into a hornet's nest on that thing.
Now, I never saw that jail, but by linear, I assume you mean that like all the cells are in like one long row.
Yes.
Right.
And the officer walks down the aisle looking in the cells.
Right. Right.
It's a reactive type of facility, so you don't deal with the situation till it's already happened.
Yeah.
It's not a very good thing for inmates.
Well, in that kind of building, you basically can't see into their cell until you get down to their cell.
Right.
Right.
So it's pretty much predator controlled.
Sure.
And,
sure.
It was a bad situation, especially the lighting was bad and everything was old.
Yeah.
including me at the time. Some of the officers that were drinking buddies with the previous warden knew my reputation.
Right.
And they knew I intended to professionalize the jail, and they quit. The game playing was over. And the sergeant I'd worked under earlier in my career, he taught me that the officers are on one side and the inmates are the other. And as a supervisor, that you walk down the middle, and that means that you treated everyone fairly regardless of their standing, whether they were inmate or officer.
Right.
And you were to be fair but firm.
Yeah.
And so that's
no
that's
room for favoritism and
No,
letting things slide because somebody's your buddy and that kind of thing.
I let it be known to any friends I had that on the job they were an officer. Off the job they might be friends, but on the job they were an officer, and that's the way I would treat everybody the same.
Okay.
Okay, we moved into a new direct supervision type of jail. That's what they've got now.
Right.
And so you had officers in the pods with the inmates. And I know that sounds crazy because when the sheriff first mentioned it, I said, Sheriff, I don't mean any disrespect or anything, but have you lost your mind as you're putting an officer in a pod with 52 inmates? And he said, well, let me take you for a tour of the other facilities. So we went different jails throughout the United States that were direct supervision, and I got to see, wow, maybe this works after all. I remember one in Contra Costa, California, where they had these big burly bikers and one officer at the pod, and he's giving these guys orders. And I asked him, doesn't that concern you? He says, no, why would it concern me? And so the main thing that I found was in this type of facility, the main thing you have to have, if it's going to be successful, because you're in with the inmates, proper training.
Right.
And that's when they developed a training structure that they use even today.
Right.
And so that you're not learning as I did by hit and miss. You go in there knowing exactly what you're supposed to do. As a matter of fact, one of the classes that I teach new recruits is the 8 principles of direct supervision. And the reason I teach that is so that when they get down into a pod, they know what to expect. You're fresh meat as far as the inmates are concerned. So, you have to get past that and let them understand, okay, you know what, you're not dealing with just a rookie here. I've been trained.
So how did you advance to major?
Okay, first of all, I've worked under 8 different sheriffs in my career.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how I got this white hair, Jared. One of the sheriffs called me into his office one day, and he pointed to his desk, and he said, pick it up. I looked down at his desk, and there was a major's badge. And he told me, Jared, he said, I've been wanting to do this ever since I got in office, but I had to wait for approval from the commissioners for the position.
Right.
He says, you've earned it. And I can remember Jared telling him, well, sir, I won't let you down. And he corrected me with, no, don't let yourself down. There's a lot of responsibility that goes with that badge. So that's when I became major, and I held that title of operations chief and with the rank of major and for 8 years until my retirement.
Wow. But major's pretty high in the department.
It's very high.
Yeah. Okay.
At that time, it was just under the chief deputy. You had the sheriff, undersheriff, chief deputy, and major. Okay.
So you got all the way to major. Do you have any advice for deputies who want to lead? They want those responsibilities. They want to progress, professionally, but they don't want to play politics. And it sounds like you avoided playing politics. Sounds like you avoided just riding one individual's coattails. You said you worked for 8 different sheriffs. And so how do you get promoted all the way that high without playing politics?
Okay, first of all, don't be a complainer or a gossiper, because you establish a reputation pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You have to establish a reputation of being fair, and you also keep in mind that you may not be a politician, but the sheriff is, and your professionalism or lack of reflects back on him.
Yeah, he's got to get reelected, and so
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't popular with some of the sheriffs because I have a sense of ethics that I follow.
Yeah.
And I wasn't afraid to say respectfully, I think you're mistaken. I think you're wrong. And
obviously some leaders above you take that better than others do.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've had people say, it's hard to believe that you held the rank of major for 8 years, because you've never been a yes person. And I don't,
right.
I realize if they're right, they're right. But but you have to do everything respectfully. Keep in mind, he is still your boss.
Yeah.
Now, it's one of the things that they require in their training now is there's a book entitled Games Criminals Play, and it's required reading.
Okay.
Now, when you go in as an officer in the jail, as a line officer, you are actually learning the traits of being a supervisor. Keep in mind, you're in there with 52 inmates, and you've got to make sure that they comply with the rules. We're also dealing with 52 different personalities.
Yeah.
You've got some that are sincere, some that will manipulate you.
Right.
So you're really getting prepared for a supervisor's position in your future.
Right.
So that would be the key. Now, one of the things that we push is that you need to learn to insulate without isolating yourself.
What does that mean?
Well, you have to be around them.
Okay.
So you have to be aware that these are still people. But you also have to be aware that they're con artists to the greatest
Sure.
extent.
And manipulators.
They're going to manipulate
Yeah.
you if you can. So you have to insulate yourself from that sort of thing.
Right.
And if you isolate yourself, that means that you treat them less than what you should as far as it being a human being.
Yeah, treating them like a human being. Right.
And if you really want some serious problems, do that.
Yeah. So if you do your job well, you take this training to heart. You don't gossip about your fellow workers and that kind of thing. What else can someone do if they really want to advance? They don't just want a job. They want to lead. They want to develop themselves professionally. Any other advice there as far as how to advance in the department?
Well, here's the thing. At one time, the sheriff picked at random who he wanted for sergeant or lieutenant or captain or whatever. Now, as far as being a sergeant now, there's an FOP in place.
Right.
So there's a process that's followed. There's a test that's taken.
Right.
And it's given by seniority.
Right.
And after the test, then they're given a real strict interview to see whether or not they've got the maturity and whether or not they're acceptable to be supervisors.
Right.
You can't just make anybody a supervisor.
Yeah.
You can have some serious problems when you're dealing with inmates and you've got somebody that's abusive or goes in there with a macho Clint Eastwood type of attitude.
Yeah.
It doesn't work in a jail.
Yeah. Understanding your own limitations would probably be good too. I mean, if you knew, you might be ambitious, but if you are desiring a position that's really outside of your current skill set, you probably need to be listening to your mentors and people like that to kind of rein you in a little bit, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from administrators that I had worked under. Some I didn't agree with some of their philosophies.
Sure.
But they had a great deal of knowledge in other areas, and I tried to learn from that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You don't go in there thinking that you know everything and you're going to run it like some kind of a dictator. It does not work in detention. It doesn't work.
Sure.
You'll get yourself in trouble so quickly. One of the things I teach when I teach my classes is throw this macho thing away.
Right.
You be yourself, because you're not going to fool an inmate.
No, they may know a little bit more street psychology than you give them credit for. They may read you and understand you better than you realize.
I guarantee you, some of these people have been in the system since they were juveniles. They've been under a lot of different officers, and they're feeling you out, and they've pretty much got your ticket 15, 20 minutes after they've talked to you. So
Sure.
Don't try to fool an inmate, and be yourself,
Yeah.
but keep the principles in mind.
Right. Well, Dewey, let me shift gears a little bit because working corrections can be very difficult. And I understand when I say corrections, a lot of people are thinking the prison system, and that's not technically what the sheriff's department is doing. Can you maybe clarify that for me a little bit? What you used the word detention earlier. What's the difference between what the sheriff's office does and what like the prison system does?
Okay, in the prisons, they've been sentenced. They're going to be there a while.
Right, it's after their trial.
After the trial and after they've been sentenced. So they've got to start on a road to rehabilitation, and there are all kinds of programs set up so that they can correct their behavior when they get out on the street, when they've done their time. Now, in detention, we are a holding facility.
Right.
Now, that doesn't
mean... It's shorter term.
Yes, shorter term.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that we don't have programs to help them.
Sure.
We have a lot of different programs to help inmates get their GED or to learn how to interact with different people in a positive way.
Sure.
We have church services.
Sure.
We've got a lot of programs, but it's different than the prison system because we know our programs have to be short term because they're not going to be there that long.
Right. Okay. But in that setting, what kind of pressures does an officer deal with? I mean, what's the most difficult part of working in detention?
The most difficult part, I would say, is being locked up with the inmates for anywhere from 8 to 10, sometimes 12 hours, depending on what type of shift they work.
And the deputy feels that you feel like you're locked up with them?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, you are. I mean, you're in the same...
You literally are.
Yeah, you really are. And, you're dealing with all these people that are stressful. They're some of them are angry because of things that happen on the outside or because their court hearings didn't work out like they thought it should.
Right.
And then you've got your, what I call youngsters that haven't matured enough to know how to act in a detention center, and they act up and act a fool, and then the officer has to deal with it, but has to deal with it correctly, or he ends up in more trouble than the inmate.
Yeah.
Now,
were you guys always working 8-hour shifts?
Right now, I understand they're working 10-hour shifts and then 3 days off.
Okay.
But there's also overtime and
that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. It wears you down psychologically.
Absolutely, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stress. In being there. Now, one of the things that we push is don't take this job personally. Understand, and this is why we give them training, understanding the inmates are going to work on you. They're going to try to find that last nerve. They don't care whether it upsets you or not.
Misery loves company.
It's fun. To them it's fun. It's not personal. They'll try to make you think it's personal, but it's not. And don't take it personally. And most of all, don't take it home with you. There's a lot of problem with that. Even the sheriff, he when he gives his talk to the recruits, he tells them, leave the job at home. Don't take it home with you.
Yeah, leave it at work. Don't take it home.
Don't take it. Leave the job at work. Don't take it home with you. Remember, you've got a family. They're depending on you, and you don't want to end up in a situation because you brought your job home with you.
How does it affect home? I mean, we all use that term, don't bring your job home with you. But what does that look like? How does it affect a family?
Attitude.
Okay.
You come home and you're mad because an inmate got under your skin, and so maybe you're a little nasty with your wife or kids. And keep in mind that the divorce rate is high for officers in the field of corrections. I mean, I was looking up some statistics on that today. It's 46%. That's pretty high for any occupation.
Yeah.
And it's because of the stress levels, and it's because they take it home with them.
Yeah, people sometimes hear that half of all marriages end in divorce, and that's the stat has been around forever. That's not really a very accurate stat because that factors in people who have been divorced 2 or 3 or 4 times. And so there are individuals, once you've been divorced once, you have a higher rate of being divorced in your second marriage or your third marriage. And so the idea that these young deputies come in and have a 46% divorce rate, that is high. Maybe people have heard 50%. They think, oh, it's below 50. No, that's actually pretty high, and that's a common problem. Marital problems are a common issue with those who work in law enforcement.
Yes, and it also takes a certain type of wife to understand that type of occupation. Now, my wife housebroke me years ago, so she was able to go with the flow. And
if you could take some of your wife's qualities and transplant them over to some of the law enforcement spouses of younger officers, what kind of things would you like to see that your wife does well? Well, what would you like to see in other law enforcement spouses?
Oh, my wife's as patient as Job. That's
Okay.
one thing.
Excellent.
And if there's a problem, she's respectful, but she's very out in the open with it. Hey, we've got a problem, and we need to discuss it.
Yeah.
And that's where it's important for the spouse, the officer, to listen and take her advice and any correction that she's got to make, because you've got to understand, she's taking care of you, but she's also taking care of the kids and a lot of things in the home, and it doesn't do you any good for her to think that, oh my gosh, I wonder what kind of an attitude he's going to have tonight.
Right.
That's not good for any family. And you look into the scriptures; they tell you how you're supposed to look at your spouses and treat them. I mean, and you can't forget that it's a very important thing, whether you're in law enforcement or any other field.
Yeah.
You're supposed to treasure your wife and family, and treat them as such. And that's something you cannot forget, or you will pay the price.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as a law enforcement officer, you have a lot of different ways to deal with this stress and to work with it away from your job. There's things you do at work, but there's also hobbies and activities and things you can participate in. What kind of things did you participate in to counteract all the negative that happened at work?
Okay, I didn't hang around the bars like a lot of them do.
I joke all the time that the cops I know, their main 2 ways of dealing with stress are cussing and drinking, and neither one of those are very good. No.
And there are certain bars that's where the cops hang out.
Oh, yeah.
I never got into that sort of thing. I was pretty much a family man.
Yeah.
Now, keeping in mind that law enforcement is very negative, and you're constantly dealing with negative people and and negative situations. I attempted to surround myself with positive hobbies, enough to keep me broke, as a matter of fact.
You'd hate to have too much money laying around. Might as well use it. Yeah.
My interests included becoming a ham license radio operator.
Okay.
And shooting, which I still enjoy to this day.
Yeah.
I liked writing poetry and writing short humor stories. I enjoyed that sort of thing.
Yeah.
My real love, though, was becoming a semi-professional clown. And I know there's nothing macho about an officer wanting to be a clown.
And you do face paint and costume and everything, right?
Absolutely, yeah. As a matter of fact, besides doing that sort of thing and doing children's parties, I perform stage work as a clown, doing skits, work parades, and there for a while I even participated in annual circus performances down at the Municipal Auditorium.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, center ring. Look at that.
I wonder how many people saw the warden of the jail as a clown and didn't realize who it was they were looking at.
I'll be honest with you. My supervisors weren't real impressed with one of their officers being a clown. Yeah. It did not make me popular with those I had to work under.
No, but but it was probably a really good, strategic decision as far as your mental health, your psychological well-being. That's probably fantastic to put on a costume and make people happy. That's probably worked really well for you.
That's what it was all about to me.
Yeah.
And I had even done hospital work as a clown. As a matter of fact, we had one fellow one time. I walked into his room, and he's kind of quiet, and he's looking out the window. And I did a few tricks for him and gave him a little bit of humor. And, he started laughing. And when I came out of his room, the nurse at the desk looked at the other nurse and she says, "Was that who I think it was?" And she says, "What room were you in?" And I told her, and she says, "That fella hasn't said 3 words in all the time he's been here."
Oh, wow.
Says, "And you had him laughing?"
Yeah.
Well, I can't even begin to tell you how that warmed my heart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's what I appreciate about clowns. I've never been a clown myself, but I appreciate that they're willing to have people laugh both at them and with them. And that kind of humility. There's a lot of law enforcement officers who take themselves so seriously and feel like they need to because of the job. But the idea of being laughed at would just mortify them. And yet I really think if they were to let their guard down, and maybe not, as a clown, but just let yourself be seen as human.
Yes.
and fragile and fallible and everything else, and where a clown deliberately gets people to laugh at them and laugh with them, I just think that is incredibly healthy to do in a job where you have to be so serious all the time, and everybody you deal with on the job, it's their worst day, and clowning actually is a nice balance to that.
Yeah, this might sound a little weird, but actually I'd rather have a pie thrown in my face than to actually eat one. I mean, that's because I enjoy the reaction that it
I might actually agree with you there. I don't care for pie, but that's awesome. Now, Dewey, I've been told that you have an infamous clown story related to law enforcement. Can you share that with us?
Oh, boy, I sure do.
So set it up for me. What happened?
All right. I've taken a couple different clown schools. And the first one that I took, it was on graduating day that I was attending this one in particular.
Uh-huh.
And they required us to come in makeup and costume so that we could be critiqued.
Because every clown has to be unique, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can't copy another clown's face.
Okay, so you're in full get-up.
I'm in full makeup and everything. I've got on this goofy-looking outfit and a big red wig, and there's no mistake what I'm doing there. Halfway through the class. Halfway through the class, I get a call from the jail supervisor on duty, and he is panic-stricken. He's saying that there's a major disturbance in the jail, and it's near riot proportions.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I says, now wait a minute. I says, I'm in clown makeup and costume, so I says, it might take me a little bit of time to get there because I've got to get changed.
And at this point, you're a captain or a major?
Yeah, I'm captain at that point.
Captain at that point,
yeah.
Okay.
And we're in the old jail.
Okay.
And the supervisor, by this time, becomes more panic-stricken. He says, no, you've got to get down here now. The inmates have ripped the phone off the wall in their cell block. They're tearing the place apart. They're throwing things. So I says, all right. So with no other option, I went to the jail as I was, makeup and costume included.
Oh, no.
It gets worse. When there, the booking officer looked at me like I had lost my mind. And covering her mouth to hide a laugh, she opened the secure gate for me to enter.
And she knew it was you, though.
She knew it was
Right,
me,
okay,
yes.
right. They don't let just any clown into that jail.
No,
right, okay.
no. I was the only clown allowed at that time. I went to my office and I secured a couple of tear gas grenades from there, and I went down to the cell block.
In full outfit, yeah.
In full outfit. I mean, we're talking the big shoes and everything.
Oh, no.
To say that the officers were surprised and shocked to see their warden in clown makeup and costume carrying 2 gas grenades would be a complete understatement. I entered the cell block. I ordered all the inmates to rack down or I would be forced to use tear gas.
They had to have been stunned into silence.
For a moment, things got very quiet.
I bet, yeah.
The inmates were staring at me, and you could tell that they weren't sure whether they were really seeing what they were seeing or whether they were hallucinating.
Yeah.
They decided they were not taking orders from a clown.
Oh, no.
So they proceeded with their activities, and I was forced to use tear gas to retain the order and get compliance with my commands. Writing the report on this incident was extremely difficult. And for weeks afterward, I expected to be called to the sheriff's office to answer questions. But it never happened, so I let it ride.
Yeah.
However, Jared, after 17 years of retirement, I still get teased on Facebook by some of the old head officers that were there when Wally the Gasser, as I was penned, gave the greatest performance of his life.
That's funny. Oh, yeah. Wally the Clown throwing tear gas. Oh, that is crazy. Well, Dewey, thank you for sharing with us about your career. Can you give any other advice for young deputies? Somebody's in the sheriff's office now, Wyandotte County or really anywhere around the country. What kind of advice would you give?
Jared, I've been very, very blessed. God has truly blessed me. And, you know, in railroading and in law enforcement, I feel like I've been blessed with 2 occupations that I really love, and that doesn't happen to everybody. My advice as Christians, we must never forget that whether we're on the law enforcement end or the detention end, we are commanded by Scripture to be peacemakers. If you recall at Matthew 5:9, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus stated, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." There is nothing easy about law enforcement or detention. Most time, you're surrounded by negative settings with negative people.
Yeah.
But you keep in mind that when Jesus died on the cross, he was surrounded by negative people in a negative setting, and he was tortured by these people before put on the cross. And yet, in his tortured and dying state, he loved them enough to ask that they be forgiven.
Yeah.
I'm not naive in this work. Where force is necessary, force must be given. But never should it be given out of anger or retribution or in excess.
Yeah.
We worship a God that loves us all, and that's every single one of us.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dewey, for talking with us. Thank you for sharing your experience. And Dewey, thank you for being one of my friends. I really appreciate what you do.
I appreciate you, Jared.
God bless you. Talking to Dewey is great. At this stage in his life, he's the perfect blend of old cowboy and loving grandfather type, like right out of central casting for a Hallmark movie. A couple of times I was really impressed with how thoughtful and compassionate the sheriff's office was, even 30 or 35 years ago. It just goes to show that wisdom and best practices were not all invented yesterday. The older retired folks still have a lot of wisdom to share with us. And that makes me want to go pick the brain of those who've gone before me so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. on the next episode of the Hey Chaplain podcast.
From the training that I'd gone through, I must have been trying to do some emergency braking, but all I remember is waking up in the hospital. My bike hit the right front corner of his car as he was turning and launched me about 75 feet through the air.
Did you have a helmet in those
I
days?
had my helmet on. I had my bulletproof vest on.
Okay.
But it messed me up pretty good.
What kind of injuries?
I had a brain bleed, which was the most significant injury. I had road rash all over.
Sure. The views expressed here are the personal views of our hosts and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like what you heard here, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening today, and as always, pray for peace in our city.